What's up everybody, this is TJ with Fake It or Make It. In today's video I'm going to be making a set of walnut spoons out of some scrap walnut that I had lying around the shop. This is going to be a really simple process and you don't need a whole lot of tools to do this. This particular walnut is very old and very dry. We will be using power tools because using a conventional spoon gouge would just be way too difficult to cut through this old, dry and very hard walnut spoon. After cutting out the shape of the spoon on the bandsaw, I go over to the sander and refine the shape and remove any cut marks that were made by the bandsaw. In this step, I'm using my pencil and my finger as a guide to define the area which will be the bowl of the spoon, or the area that's dished out. After you're satisfied with the area that you've drawn to be the bowl of the spoon, we're going to go back over to the belt sander. Before I start sanding the walnut, I want to remove any other sawdust and shavings that was left on the belt sander from previous wood species. Now I just lightly sand the contours on the back of the spoon, rounding everything over, giving it a nice round contour. Be careful doing this step and make sure that you have a really good hold of your workpiece. I ended up with a manicure that I'll never forget at some point in this video that I'll not show. Now we're getting to my favorite part, where I get to use the Dremel tool with a kutzall bit. This is a coarse kutzall bit that I purchased on Amazon. Right here, I'm just using the kutzall bit to go around the outside of the bowl of the spoon and refine the shape and remove any deep cut marks that were left by the bandsaw. Now I know this isn't the traditional method of carving wooden spoons. I tried using my gouges and whittling knives, but they just dulled really fast on this old dry walnut, and it really made a mess and chipped out a bunch of the wood and didn't make really nice cuts. Next, I'm just going to use a small sanding drum on the Dremel to get some of these hard to reach spots and smooth out some of the sharp edges left by the kutzall bit. Normally you would use a green wood. Say you find a green limb that just fell out of a tree. That wood cuts really well with sharp tools and sharp chisels and gouges, and makes really pretty spoons. I just had this walnut and it was really sentimental to me and I wanted to use it, and I hate to see any nice wood go to waste, so I decided to go ahead and make the spoons. Maybe, not using a traditional approach, but it still ends up the same. I still have a spoon at the end of the day and I think they turn out nice. Now that I'm happy with the rest of the spoon, I want to start working on the dish or the bowl of the spoon. Right here I'm going to use a spherical shaped kutzall bit. This is a coarse kutzall bit and is very aggressive. You need to be mindful of the direction of the grain and be sure to have a firm grip on your Dremel attachment to make sure that the bit doesn't get away from you and you cut into wood that you don't want to cut into. You need to make sure that you're wearing good eye protection because this thing throws dust and chips and shavings and splinters everywhere. Now, something I learned while using the kutzall bit for this project, there's areas inside the bowl of the spoon that are end grain. And whenever you're cutting the end grain with the kutzall bit, it has the capacity to cut really deep score marks and make really hard to remove gouges in the end grain. So keeping that in mind, I'm going over those areas again with a coarse kutzall bit. The first one I was using was a extreme coarse and it's very rough. So in the future, I would like to get a fine kutzall bit to really refine the finish and smooth out any gouges that were left by the previous kutzall bits and really try to remove some of those deep scratches. That's just something to keep in mind whenever you're cutting end grain with these, that it could be kind of difficult to remove some of those scratches and gouge marks. Now comes my least favorite part, hand sanding. We're going to start off with some 80 grit sandpaper, and I just want to go over the whole thing and try and remove any deep scratch marks that were left from whittling and sanding and carving from previous steps. Most of my time will be spent in the bottom of the bowl trying to refine the edges and smooth everything out and get some of these deep groove marks that were left by the kutzall bit. I don't know for sure if a fine cut kutzall bit would make the surface that much better. I'm going to have to order some and try because it would really save on a lot of hand sanding if I could go through all the steps of the kutzall bits going from very coarse to fine and then going into sandpaper, because there was a lot of hand sanding to do in the bottom of the bowl on the spoon. After I finished sanding with the 80 grit, I moved on to 100 grit sandpaper. I want to mention that these spoons are purely for decoration only. They will not be food grade in any capacity. These are just for decoration, or like a kind of like a little tchotchke, I guess, if you will. Now, if you wanted this to be a food grade spoon, all you would have to do is change the material that you use to finish the wood. Everything would stay the same up to that point. You would just have to use a food grade finish, like maybe mineral oil or coconut oil or something along those lines. Now we're going on to 150 grit sandpaper. This is very simple, and you just work your way up through the grits. There's no magic involved. It just takes a lot of elbow grease and a lot of patience. Moving right along, we're going to be using 220 grit sandpaper next. Now I bet you're wondering why I'm using 5-inch disc sanding paper for this instead of using sheet sandpaper. Well, honestly, I was just given a whole bunch of it for free, so I figured I might as well use it. I have all the different various grits that I need for any given project, so I use it when I can. Now we're going to be using 320 grit sandpaper, and this is going to be where you're really starting to refine your finish and getting a nice, good, smooth surface, and gives you a good idea of any places you might have missed that has deep scratches that you need to readdress, like right here. I found that some of the deep scratches and gouges from the previous kutzall bit were still left in the end grain and around the rim of the bowl on the spoon. So I took a fine stone spherical shaped bit and I went around the edges and just really burnished in the wood grain and made it as smooth as possible. Now that all our sanding is complete, it's time for finish. I chose True Oil by Birchwood Casey. Typically I would use this finish on gun stocks because it's a hard wearing finish and it's really easy to apply. I mentioned earlier that these two spoons will not be used in food or anywhere near food. These are just for decoration only. To apply the oil, I use my bare hands. I take small drops of the oil and either put it on my finger or on the wood itself and slowly rub it into the grain, making sure that there is no oil pulling up or running. You don't want to leave runs or leave it to pool up, as it will take longer to dry and then you'll just have to sand out those thick areas. 2 coats of True Oil on these wooden spoons will be sufficient. Dry times depend largely on temperature and humidity. Right now it's about 70 degrees outside with a high humidity, probably about 80%. I will need to leave this finish to dry overnight before I can apply my second coat. You can apply as many coats of the True Oil finish as you like. The more coats of finish you put, the stronger the finish will be and the more durable. You can either leave it shiny or you can make it matte by taking a 4/0 steel wool pad and lightly roughing up the surface and burnishing it. This will result in a satin or matte finish. Well, that's it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did, be sure to like and subscribe. Also, hit the little bell to get notifications for whenever I put out new videos. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave them down in the comments section down below. Also, I would like to hear if you've ever made a wooden spoon. What wood did you use? What kind of tools did you use? Let me know. I'd love to hear about it. Y'all be safe and y'all come back now.